That's it. So this is the third part of our investigation of Teshuva, Tefila, and Tzedaka. Can they change our fates? Um, or in what way might they be able to change our fates? Um, and last week we talked a little bit about Teshuva, like what is Teshuva before we finished our class. That was a meaningful discussion. I know, Daniel, you had to go shortly before we finished. So I want to dive in this time with starting with the question of what actually is prayer. What does prayer mean to you? Not just like, oh, we go to shul and we use the machzor or the siddur or whatever, but like at its essence, what is prayer and what's your relationship with prayer? Do you find like where do you feel a sense of connection, if at all, with God, and in what ways does that come up? And yeah, just let's start by just sharing what's your relationship with prayer?
I pray the best in my backyard, kind
Mm-hmm.
of walking around. And I feel like I'm talking with somebody. I really do. And there have been moments in my life that if I'm paying attention and I'm listening, that later on ideas pop into my head that I would not have necessarily come up with on my own. So that's my relationship.
Beautiful. So a sense of place. Good place is outside, backyard. So it's a private space and an outdoor space. You have a feeling that something is listening to you. Do you usually pray in your own words?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. So spontaneous personal prayer. And even if you don't feel like, oh, I'm hearing voices replying to me right now, like you get insight or instructions of a sort,
Not right away.
and pop through it after a little while. Sometimes you have a sense
Not
like,
always.
not always. Great. I love that. That's so much great stuff there. Thank you, Marilyn. Would anybody else be willing to share something about their relationship with prayer?
Yeah, I think there are two sides to it. One is there are very few moments when I felt go close to God, and they just come upon me unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is the prayer services. I like having said the same thing many, many times, because I never know when a line out of one of the prayers is going to suddenly light up like it's neon.
Mm.
Very important to me and very meaningful and
Mm.
helpful. So I see it as two different kinds of events.
Beautiful. You're probably familiar with I think Suzuki Roshi has this great quote, as a Zen teacher, that grace is an accident, but practice makes us accident prone.
Aha, I like that.
So I hear something of that, and like it's unexpected and intermittent, but nonetheless having a frequency of returning to the same liturgy, like something can light up or like something can come through sometimes. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And that happens more often with the regular prayer and the Siddur. The piyutim in Machzor are a whole different thing that kind of work you into a space that you normally, I think that's not just true for me, where you don't usually wind up slowed down and getting stuck and so on. And it's a very, very different thing. When, of course, that only applies when you're in a congregation that gets into the piyutim much. anyway, I think that's a really important difference between the high holidays and the rest of the year, when you're speaking directly to God, when you're speaking in what could be your voice, just really direct. And in the high holidays, there's a very different point than just being direct and simple kind of thing.
Mm.
So there can be that also, but there's something else going on.
So you feel that the rest of the year, the liturgy is more direct, and in the high holidays, there's something more abstracted or impersonal, poetic going on.
Not exactly impersonal, but it's almost like getting into a little bit into a labyrinth where you can be yourself, but you have to be aware of what's around you, and you have to pay attention to a lot of more things, a lot more of the texture of the space that you're in, which is a different tempo, different just a different flavor. I don't know how, to what extent that's true in more purely renewal services or whatever. I'm not sure, but anyway.
Definitely not that much, that many P2. I'll say that in renewal services. Thank you. I love those sensory images of the labyrinth and the flavor and the texture. And I hear you speaking about the context of
and it is very sensory, more complicated, like perfume, like fragrance versus something simple, hard to express. I don't know.
I love it. Thank you. Jerry, did you want to share something?
Yeah, it's complicated. It's interesting because if I'm at services, the part of the service that and the prayer that has any kind of meaning to me is really when I do the Amida, when I have my personal prayers, and I have, most of the prayers, it's praising God, and I have conflicts with this constant praise of is that what God wants? Is what God asking for is that we constantly praise him, or is God asking for us to praise each other the way we treat each other? A lot of, I very rarely pray for myself. I pray a lot for people in the family. And I don't necessarily pray for fix it, because I don't think that's how it works. It's that insight of how to fix it. It's that aha moment, give me or someone else that aha, oh, have we tried this or that? And see if that fixes whatever the issue is, especially on health issues. So it is kind of complex. I mean, I love Naguns. I for whatever reason, there's no words, and I find it so meaningful. I feel so connected when whether it's Rabbi Mark or anybody just does a Nagun. I just it really connects me.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Steve, Daniel, what do you think?
For me, it's both Thanksgiving and supplication of things that I hope for. It's also ordering my mind, and sometimes, unfortunately, that takes away from the prayer, where your attention goes and to something else that maybe the words make you think of or whatnot, but it's still an ordering process. It's security or bitachon, just communicating that I know that what's going on is right and good for me, and then It's also, I think contact is the best word. I think it's the best way to contact Hashem, if you will, because I take the idea from the Alter Rebbe where like, it's like the ray of the sun. It's coming and it's hitting you from afar, from a different time, right? So back, we're sending words back to Hashem. And then it's also sacrifice because it's both the korbanot in the morning and before prayer. So we're redoing the sacrifices, but it's also, it takes time. I pray every day and it's time consuming.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. Steve.
I guess for me, I see the value more as a meditative moment, right? It's a moment to sort of step away from whatever else I'm doing and maybe have a shift in perspective, right? So it's easy in normal life to not be thinking about some of the bigger issues or, and like what Jerry was saying about how, there's all this praising stuff. And I the value that I see in that is sort of reminding myself that I'm just a small part of things. I'm small, the world's big. Let's remember that, right? Because in our culture, it's pretty easy to just wrap yourself in yourself. So I think that's the value I see of it. I don't know. I probably have other thoughts, but that's what comes to mind now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll just share that I made the decision that for this 40 days of preparation for Yom Kippur, maybe I told you this last time, that I wanted to like proactively work on my relationship with God. And some of the way I've been doing that is through writing, through journaling and seeing what comes up. And it's not that every day, but it's been that sort of most days. And it's been really illuminating, putting that at the center of my focus. And it feels really helpful to address that directly because I think, and I especially feel this, as a prayer leader, as a rabbi and whatever, that this part kind of gets missed. The what do we think we're praying to? How do we think it relates to us? Where is it? All these kinds of questions about like, what is God and what is the nature of prayer? We're kind of skipped over, and then we expect people to be sort of on board with a liturgy of thoughts, or something like a Rosh Hashanah service. And for me, that always feels like a very painful skipping over of something, and very sort of undermining to the process, honestly. And I know that some people don't have problems with it, and they're the people that are there. And I know a lot of other people feel really alienated, and like that really needs some discussion, and we kind of lose them from the outset. Or I think there's a large middle category of people who find coming to, let's say, Rosh Hashanah services or Yom Kippur services meaningful, but not for any reasons of like actually expecting to communicate with God, or never mind, feel communicated with by God. There are lots of other reasons why it's meaningful and comforting to participate in High Holy Day services or Shabbat services or weekday services for that matter. But I feel like it could go deeper. Like I'm always interested in like how people can actually have a stronger personal spiritual connection themselves. So what I'd like to look at today is some ideas about prayer, and also a couple of the liturgies, if we have time, that are used particularly at this season. I did just email you this source sheet, but you can also see it on the screen right here. And I wanted to start by bringing you the etymologies. This is from like the Biblical Hebrew Dictionary, and as you can see, I've sort of I've cut out a lot of it, but here are the sort of main ideas. The way this dictionary is organized is that you probably know the word lahitpalel, to pray, comes from a verb root palal. But the way that this dictionary is organized, you see that palal is actually a subroot within the root palach or pelech, which, as we learn here, actually means something to do with being round or being hemispherical, and has to do with the whirl of a spindle or a circuit or district. So there's something inherent. Lehit palal it's a reflexive verb form. The word to pray is reflexive, but actually it comes from a verb root which has some kind of meaning of roundness or circularity in and of itself. And then, as we can see specifically, palal means intervene, interpose, intercede, judge. It also has this quite bizarre meaning of to cut oneself with in worship, to the notched edge of a sword. And then it probably isn't related, but kind of interestingly, you can see that the root words are Greek as opposed to these other words, which are Assyrian and Arabic. But this word palal from a Greek root means a wall builder. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting kind of homophonic connection, even though it's probably not the same root meaning. So what do you get from that, these meanings to do with being round and judgment, intercession, cutting oneself with the sword, mediate, arbitrate? Does that add anything to your understanding of prayer?
It doesn't say anything about a connection between pelech and palal. So
well, you see that the palal is in brackets, and it has the punctuation. That means it's actually with the opening root of a given set of roots is noted without punctuation, without the brackets.
Does Klein have the same connection?
I don't know. I only have BDB. You're welcome to look it up and let me know.
Go get Klein.
Go get Klein. Off you go. So this is how I understand the dictionary to be read anyway. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's interesting.
5 steps away. Here he is.
Okay, you'll look that up. Other folks, what do you think? Or Shula, did you have something to say about these connotations?
Yes, you question.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was it, Rabbi?
Oh, anybody. What do you think of these interesting connotations of these related words, Daniel?
Yeah. So it just came up in a professional conversation today that in cybersecurity, there's this way to intervene at different steps to prevent a loss. That loss can be anything, right? You can think of. That makes sense to me that like God can, or we as humans in the opposite direction can intervene, and there can be a change in things based on this connection through prayer.
Great. I love that reference point. There can be different points on the circle in which we affect a change, but you're also making the claim that tefillah can change something, can change the future in some way, to refer back to the title of this class. What do other folks think of that, or of these etymological connections?
It's a little complicated, but Klein considers it as unknown, but it could be related to various things, none of them being a circle.
Okay, well, tell us what Klein says.
Things like cut, things like nafal, as in prostrating oneself, and so I was wondering. Anyway, it seemed a little suspicious, but anyway, etymology can be like that.
Right, it's somewhat speculative. You know, they're connecting it to this Arabic word or this Assyrian word or this Greek word. Okay, well, that's interesting. Nafal, to fall on one's face, which they do repeatedly throughout the Bible, and the rabbis mostly disapproved of, which is why we only do it on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Could be another related meaning. Anyone else want to comment on any of this?
I'm focusing on it to be round, this whirl of a spindle. And is it like the prayer goes to Hashem and something comes back, and it's that round back and forth, almost like a wordless dialogue, or at least one side is using words or thoughts, and the other side is whatever. Sort of spiritual intervention.
So the circularity of communication.
Yeah.
And I like what you said, a wordless dialogue. Yeah, that's the sense I get from it. And also that it's an inherently reflexive activity, that when we really pray, when I really pray, whether or not like anything, God that's beyond me is hearing it, I'm hearing it, I'm receiving. When I hear the depth of my intention, I'm impacted by receiving that, and so it's a sort of circular process, but it's a circular process of entrainment of oneself.
So I have a question, since you've got this, you're bringing up this etymology that's presumably from ancient times, but am I right in thinking that our ancestors who would have been around when this language was developing wouldn't have had the same concept of prayer as we do now, right? Wouldn't most of their worship have been tied up with physical acts like animal sacrifice, and much less with liturgy and, the daily ritual of prayer?
Well, the short answer is, two short answers are: one, we don't know, and two, everybody's different. So I'm sure that there's always been a range of spiritual practice, just as there is now. I would say probably less than animal sacrifice. People had, we know that people had like household shrines where they made offerings and presumably would, go to commune, or if not inside their houses, on like their local hilltop with a, sacred tree and whatever. So my assumption is that people have always prayed in that, using words to some extent, and usually probably their own words. It's certainly true that we have much more of a liturgical system as of the last, let's say, 1800 years, 1500 years than the ancients did. But that said, some of the parts of the Bible are, in fact, some of the most ancient parts are the sort of explicitly prayer parts. So parts of the book of Psalms, some of the Psalms are probably the amongst the oldest parts of the Tanakh, and also other parts like the Song at the Sea, which is sort of like a prayer, and Hannah's prayer and Deborah's song. These are thought to be like very, very ancient. So what we have from that record is that like people have always felt some desire to like express profound feelings into words, and also it's very hard to do. Like when you're in the state of like wordless knowing, it's wordless, right? It tends to kind of go beyond language. So I think that's why there's been a reliance on where people have sort of managed to channel that into language. Then we've formalized it and gone back to it. And to Jerry's point about does God need all this praise? I don't know that God needs all this praise, although Reb Zalman would always say that, we are feeding the God field. And actually the God field does need feeding, especially in this sort of irreligious world that we're in, where people take, and they don't do nearly as much as the ancients or traditional societies, which are that much closer to death, to nature. You're just one crop harvest or a couple crop failures away from, actually losing members of the community. That prayer was much closer to people because mortality was much closer to people. The God field does need feeding, and our prayers do feed it. But that aside, I think it's less that God needs our praises and more that like these are the records that we have of people having had kind of like ecstatic experiences, and what comes through is like a desire to praise, like, oh my God, you're unbelievable, you're amazing, this is extraordinary, I can't believe this incredible world, only they said it better, and they said it in Hebrew. And then we go back to those praises. I've definitely experienced those prayer states. I understand where a prayer like Yishtabach is coming from, that I just want to praise and laud and glorify and extol and elevate and all that. Like that's the feeling that comes. So that's my assumption about that.
Also, Rabbi Nachman writes that it's implicit in some of the ideas of, or what's said in the Torah about the forefathers, that they were in silence, they went out to pray, even though it doesn't say that they went to pray. It's implied. Right.
And there is this tension because we have this ginormous liturgy, this uncomfortably large and wordy liturgy, that we also have these ideas, as Daniel's saying, like that they would meditate, or that they would go out at dawn or at dusk, it says in the Mishnah, the first chapter of the Mishnah says that the ancients, or the beginning of the Masechet Brachot says that the ancients would something like meditate, or would delay for an hour before they prayed. So they were doing something to get in the zone, which we've then filled up with words. That's why we have Pesukei de Zimra, because we didn't know how to wait in the appropriate way. Probably meant something like meditation or some kind of activity like gets you in the prayer space. So that's the intention about reading Psalms in the morning. But yeah, I've certainly had the experience of like, I'm so busy with the liturgy that I don't actually have time to pray, or like I get towards the end of the Amida and you're supposed to kind of leave space. Reb Zalman would also say, don't hang up the line, wait for God to say something back, but I'm too busy. Like I gotta keep going with the prayer book. So and as you mentioned with Rabbi Nachman, like the great Hasidic masters, they were doing the whole liturgy, but they were also doing a lot of other personal spiritual practice of spending, in some cases, the Baal Shem Tov, it said, spent the entire week on his own in the forest. He would only come home for Shabbat. Rabbi Nachman, as we'll see, recommended to his students that they be speaking aloud to God in their own words for at least an hour a day. But this was, of course, they weren't allowed to say, and you should do that instead of the liturgy. So they were, trying to hold both, which, as Daniel says, it's pretty time consuming. And especially if you daven with Kavana, that could be like really 9 hours a day that you're in prayer, which is hard to balance with family and responsibilities and earning a living and all that. All right, anyone else want to say anything, or shall we have a look at these sources? Okay, jump in at any time. So I like this quotation. Well, let's read a couple of these quotations here. Anyone want to read to us what Gail Warner says or Rabbi Wittenberg says?
Prayer is a call to partnership, conscious placing of our spirits and intentions in alignment with the creative spirit. This call to partnership is always answered. Interesting. I like the line, prayer is a call to partnership, the placing of our spirits and intentions in alignment. I wonder about, is it always answered?
I was going to say the same thing. That the first sentence I can get behind, but that second sentence just lands with a thud with me.
Now, of course, the answer could be no, but
yeah, that might be her experience, but I'm assuming Gail Warner is a woman. But yeah. I don't necessarily think that's true for a lot of people, and I would say especially for a lot of Jews, actually, because there are a lot of agnostic and even atheistic Jews who go to services and participate in the ritual, and they're not necessarily being answered, right? They're participating because of something that they get reflectively, I suppose, or by being with community, which is not necessarily what this is talking about.
I think that the call is us calling to spirit here, not that God calls to us and we always respond. I would agree with you, a lot of people don't. And you might say, hey, I don't think that actually spirit always responds when we show up and say, I'm ready, I'm here.
That second line, I also have a lot of trouble with it in our history. I was on several ADL webinars today talking about anti-Semitism. And you think about our history and even what goes on today. Are these prayers being answered the way we would like them to be answered, or are they being answered at all? You know, we don't understand why things are happening. And it's like, where do we go to try to get an explanation? And even if we do get an explanation, it's still troublesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like Tevia's line, like, chosen for what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the answers may not be very satisfying. Yeah, very true. What do you think about this this idea from Rabbi Wittenberg? Should I read it? Someone else want to read it?
I can read it. The purpose of prayer is to humble us in God's presence, to comfort and include us in a greater life, to nourish and inspire us, and to remind our spirit of the flame of which it is part. For prayer, we therefore need stillness. Like a child holding a jar of clear water to which drops of color have been added, life shakes us up till all the many tints are dispersed to every corner of our being, and everything is opaque. Only inner quiet, meditation, and prayer have the power to restore clarity to our being. In that clarity, we experience once more the capacity for love and the desire to give.
Thank you. Discuss.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Sure.
feel like this one
Go
makes
ahead, go
more
ahead.
sense. This one makes
Yeah.
more sense to me, right? Like that first clause there, the purpose of prayer is to humble us, right? That's one of the things I said is one of the things I get out of the practice of Jewish prayer is reminding myself of how small I am compared to the cosmos, and so I that really resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to remind our spirit of the flame of which it is part, that we're part of something bigger. I also like that we need stillness, which personally, a lot of times in a synagogue, I don't find the stillness until we do the Amida. There's a lot of, I don't want to call it noise, but there's a lot of information coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could hear that almost like that's like the child who's shaking the jar. Like all the rest of the service is like, stimulation. And then when we drop into the Amida, there's time for things to kind of get quiet and settle a bit.
Yeah.
Also, it makes me think back to biology and Richard Dawkins and this idea that a human being is a colony of cells in one respect, right? And if you could put a neon light in those cells, then we'd light up, right, as one big neon thing. But we don't see it that way, right? We just see ourselves disparate parts, hands, arms, legs. But to get back to, like, we have to realize that we're at once that this crazy, huge colony of many, many, many different parts, but there's still a unification, and it is that clear water. And so we can't recognize that in the normal course. We just can't.
So prayer allows us to feel a holistic, our holistic connection, a holism with something as part of something. Beautiful.
This is talking about prayer doing something for us, not so much as prayer doing anything for God, which I like, because I remember for many years of my younger self that if something was threatening, I would ask God to protect me, or ask God to please not let this happen, things like that. I absolutely cannot ask God for anything anymore. I can't ask. I don't think that he wants to hear me asking.
Why do you say that?
He may want to hear me praising, but I don't think he wants to hear me asking.
Why do you think that?
I think I have changed. My idea of the world and of life has changed. And I absolutely am unable to say, oh God, please do this. I'm more likely to look for appreciation, maybe meditation.
I'm not saying you're wrong or you're right, but I am curious to know why it is that it doesn't seem appropriate to you to ask God for things.
It's just something that one day when I did it, I said, oh, I can't do that anymore. I don't know why. I think it's just a matter of we change, and we don't always know why we've changed, but we sure do change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very interesting. Thank you for that reflection. Jerry, is Marilyn there? Does she want to say anything?
Yeah, Marilyn had a Mohs surgery this morning,
Oh,
so her face is driving her nuts.
oh, okay.
What was
If you want to say anything.
You're muted now.
I'm actually here in the background. I'm just, all of the lidocaine is wearing off, so I'm just a little uncomfortable. But anyway, when I pray, I tend not to specifically ask God to do something. I pray for knowledge. It is what I'm always praying for. Help me figure out how I can. Don't do that. You're making me lose my train of thought. He's trying to get me to read what is there. Pray for knowledge to help me help the person or persons that I'm praying for.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say we'll pray for you and your healing.
Oh, it's going to be fine. It's just a little uncomfortable tonight. It'll be fine. Thank you, though.
Glad to hear that. Which is another aspect of prayer. Prayer is intercession. But I want to draw attention to this last line. It seems similar to what you're saying, Marilyn. In that clarity, or I guess the last two lines, only inner quiet meditation and prayer had the power to restore clarity to our being, like giving us the stillness that we need for the colors to settle to the bottom of the jar. In that clarity, we experience once more the capacity for love and the desire to give. Do you agree? Does getting quiet and still and allowing things to settle inherently lead to more capacity for love or more desire to give? Daniel's nodding.
Yes, I think so. I experienced that personally, and I also I think that when you go about your day normally, you're so focused on your goals or your work or whatever it is that you often forget why you're doing what you're doing. And then prayer with the quietude and the focus allows you to remember why you're doing what you're doing, and move away from the normal very busyness of our lives. So and that's when that love and that desire to love comes into focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. I think that's terrific.
Beautiful. Any other thoughts on this before we move on?
And we were just talking about
Don't feel pressure to be here if you're uncomfortable.
Oh, no, this is very interesting, actually.
Now we were just talking about that. That's why I muted. You know, the child shaking up the jar with all the tints mixing up, but it's then when you stop and you let things settle and it starts to clear up again, and that's when you start to see or feel that clarity again,
Yes.
because you've gotten that. Your mind has some time to clean out, to flush whatever is in there.
I like that. Time to flush.
Well, and to get organized in your thoughts and not be scattered. And it's also sometimes pulling the emotional panicky feeling and replacing it with a more rational, intellectual.
Mm-hmm. 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 That's what Daniel said at the beginning. It gives him time to order his mind. It allows things to come settled. So I wanted to share with you another text, which I think is really quite remarkable. This is one of the earlier Hasidic rabbis, Pinchas of Koretz, uses this amazing image of a tightrope walker or an acrobat. Can someone read this this next source for us?
Sure, I can read it.
Great.
There are certain things you cannot teach another person. For example, a tightrope walker must balance their body very carefully. They gyrate and twist to maintain a perfect equilibrium. Now, if someone were to learn to imitate the movements, thinking, at this point, the acrobat moved to the right, there they moved to the left, I'll do the same thing. Such a person would surely plunge to the ground after the first step. The same applies to serving God. Prayer cannot be imitated. Everyone must find his or her own individual approach to the service of God.
Oh,
100%. I agree with that 100%. And prayer is individual. I pray different than Marilyn prays. That prays different than anybody else here. It is. You can't copy it. Because I think we were at Cirque du Soleil this summer with human beings doing things human beings don't do, including walking on these tight ropes with bicycles and stuff. It's like, oh, that looks real easy. I'll try that.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I also think that there's an art within your prayer, right? So just like the mark of an artist is also individual, same here. It's everybody makes art differently, whether you're an artist or just drawing a picture with in an activity or whatnot, right? every person is unique in that way here too.
Right. Right. Let's read this next couple sources as well and add them to the mix. These are all really coming from Rabbi Nachman. This first one via Aryeh Kaplan. Gideon or Shula, will you read this Aryeh Kaplan quote?
Beginning, it is very good.
Mm-hmm.
It is very good to pour out your thoughts before God like a child, pleading before its parent. Deuteronomy tells us you are children to God. Therefore, it is good to express your thoughts and troubles to God like a child complaining and pestering their parent. I remember Solomon saying when he was very young, seeing his father on one of the high holidays, weeping as he went through the service. And Solomon asked him, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "Because it's been such a long time since I talked to God."
Mm.
That really stuck with me. I don't think asking God for things like one of these says, it's the same as talking to God. I don't have to plead before my divine parent, but I do have to talk to him or her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I find this interesting because I was a middle school counselor for over 10 years. And one of the things as a counselor you let kids do is just pour it out. Just talk. Don't give answers, just talk. Get your thoughts out, get your troubles out. And in doing that, a lot of times you figure out what the problem is yourself and you figure out the answer. So in the same respect, I'm expressing my thoughts and troubles to God, and in just letting it all out, so to speak, and that complaining and pestering, maybe it'll help clear that muddy water, and I'll suddenly say, whoa, wait a minute. I can do X, Y, and Z to help fix this problem, or whatever it is.
That's right. There's another great Hasidic aphorism. I think it's Rabbi Zisha Vanipoli says, "Be like a baby." I learned 3 things from babies. 1, to always be occupied with something. 2, always be learning something. 2, to be satisfied when my basic needs are met. And 3, to not hesitate to really wail if my needs aren't being met. And I love the directness of this. It's like, keep it really simple. Keep it really simple. There's also this quote in the Talmud that says, though the gates of prayer may be locked, the gates of tears are never locked. When we really sincerely cry, when we're crying from the heart, that this has it is like God as a parent, and it's just can't, it doesn't remain impervious to the real depth of our distress. At least on a spiritual level. And Jerry, I know you're and so why did God not intervene? Maybe, well, so that's a whole other class. We can talk about that more.
But sometimes, like in a parent's case, especially as a child gets older, a teenager, you don't want to give them an answer.
Yeah.
Let them figure it out for themselves.
Right.
Should God always be giving us answers?
Right.
Because after a while, you take it for granted. Oh, I don't have to worry about what I'm doing. God will answer it. He'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciated what Marilyn said. This idea of what we're actually praying for is to get more insight, to get more understanding of how we should behave. We're not actually asking for some Deus Ex Machina intervention. we're asking to be empowered in the necessary ways.
And from a anthropological perspective, and forgive me if this is too far, but we know that prayer is especially important for men, right? Traditionally, women are exempt, if you will, not that they should, right, but that they're exempt, and it's because men have a very difficult time doing this after they mature, to complain and pester their parents. Just it in general, it's can be very cathartic for men that this is naturally a very difficult thing to do. Not I at the risk of overgeneralizing, because not every single man, but I'm just saying it's very practical, and it's a channel for men to be able to do that.
I love that point. You're saying it's like an outlet to complain, to ask for help, to channel their feelings. And also I hear you kind of saying maybe like not to be at the top of the food chain. Like if you're constantly being expected to be the one who's like stable and has the answers and, you know, isn't ruffleable, like to have somewhere to turn where you're like, I don't know, give me some help here. Yeah. Although, yes, patriarchal images of God, you know, that God has to be male because it's like the top of the food chain. And like, yeah, again, whole other class. But I love that point. Thanks for saying that. Let's add in this basic instructions for hitbodedut. Hitbodedut literally means being alone with oneself. Again, same reflexive form. Hitpalel is to be circular with oneself, or to intercede with oneself. Hitbodedut is to be alone with oneself. And this was like the great practice of Rabbi Nachman that he taught, or a great practice that Rabbi Nachman taught, but the contemporary Breslovers are very into. And I will say, people who really do hitbodedut every day, like there's something about them. There's something really like clear and powerful about people who really talk to God for an hour a day in their own words. Halavai, I should have that practice. Hitbodedut should be practiced in a simple, straightforward manner, as if you were conversing with a close friend, with someone you trust. If you are absolutely unable to speak to God, then try saying one word with as much strength as possible. Saying that word over and over again will eventually lead to a breakthrough. God will have compassion on the person, and they will eventually be able to express themselves. Or actually, he says elsewhere, like, you know, just make sounds. If you really can't even find words, just make sounds.
That's meditating. That's a mantra, whatever it is, over and over, and it does help. Again, because I've done that, and it just clears your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jerry, you said before the nigun, if you just hold that tune, it helps.
Yeah. 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 Does anyone here, has everybody here tried hitbodedut? Ever?
I've never even heard the word before now, so. So it's just a meditation practice, basically. Is that what you're saying?
It's a speaking practice. It's a spontaneous prayer practice, ideally. And he says, ideally, you want to be outside, but somewhere that you can be, like you can be loud. So in fact, there are like parts of the forest near Jerusalem where you'll like often hear people like yelling and screaming. They're like screaming in prayer, where the Breslovers hang out. So ideally, you could be outside, but somewhere where you can be loud, whether that's private or public space. And ideally, he says you should set a timer. You know, you should do it for a certain length of time, and ideally, same time, same place every day to like really build it as a practice. But the idea is you just talk to God and you really let it all hang out, like Jerry was saying before about being a middle school counselor. Like just like really talk it out. Go to God with your problems. No self-censoring, just, like free writing. Whatever comes up, you say it.
That's it, to me, is a very Eastern philosophy. Isn't it?
In what way?
That sort of either talking to yourself or going out into the forest and just screaming, letting the feelings out, or again, the mantras over and over again. I'm not a scholar of Eastern philosophy, but it just seems to me that way.
I don't know enough about Eastern religions to know what the parallels are. I know it's an authentic Hasidic practice, and for some people, some contemporary Jews, it's like really very central to their practice.
And we are Near Eastern, but we really are. We have so much of that in our full practice of Judaism, even though sometimes we don't think of it as part of our regular practice, because it's not part of, I don't think, at least the normal contemporary conservative or reform practices.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. And, obviously there's a lot of interpenetration with North Africa, and then, from the Baltic, actually with Turkey, and mystical Islam, for sure, from, for the last 1,000 years, lot of interconnection, and Islam, stretched all the way over to India. So that whole, that, yes, as Dan says, we're a Near Eastern culture. So we're being right in the middle there. You do get a lot of different cultural influences, and you may know that there's a mythology even that there's mythology about people going to India and coming back with wisdom. There's also mythology that Abraham's last set of children with Keturah, who just get like one line in the Chumash, that they go off to India and become the ancestors of all the the Indian religions. So, I mean, this is just like us trying to explain how Abraham's the father of all faith, but I shouldn't say just, but like there's that mythology, and actually there's an Umberto Eco book about it. I think it like shows up also in Christian mythology, this idea. So anyway, wherever it comes from, I will say it's a very powerful practice, and it's something that as a facilitator, I sometimes have the occasion to, it's something that's much easier to do, where it's like, okay, we're all in a group and we're all going to go and do this now for the next 25 minutes. Go. Like then you will actually do it for 25 minutes, or at least 15 of those 25 minutes. And it's easier to do when you're in that context. So I've facilitated this for groups on numerous occasions, and it's always extraordinarily powerful. People really do come back with answers, or with like a real clarity about something, or like a real breakthrough about something. It's very direct, it's very inescapable. And I've never been in the place of like doing it every day. I'm sure if you do it every day, it's like any other practice. Like sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it's blah, and sometimes it's just like the previous time, and like any practice. Has anyone ever been in a regular Hitbodedut practice? Done it a lot? Has anyone here ever done it at all, other than me? Daniel, have you?
Yes, I have, but definitely struggled. It's not, yeah, but I do every morning try to concentrate on one single breath. That's where, and I've seen, just like it says here, just try something, right? But so it's not Hitbodedut, but it's something, and I do like that. It's very good.
So you say one individual breath?
Correct. Yeah, where I'm in a like back to Jerry's point, like a Buddhist pose, and just one breath, and express gratitude really to Hashem, and just in that one breath.
I love that. So the whole liturgy is kind of like a warm up, and then you do this power move just for like the space of one breath, but with like complete focus and attention.
Well, actually, this is before I pray. So this is just super early, like right after I wake up.
Gorgeous. I wonder if I could encourage you to try doing that 3 times a day. So we could look at Psalm 27, but we don't have a lot of time. So you all know that Psalm 27 is traditionally read morning and evening throughout this whole period. It's amazing. I sent you this Reb Zalman translation, which you may already have. Like I said, this source sheet is in your email, hopefully. But the other core liturgy of the Days of Awe, and we're going to look at this more in the Slichot service as well, is the liturgy that comes, we know it best from Parshat Ki Tisa, where after the mistake with the golden calf, God's like, I'm gonna get rid of these people, and Moses is like, no, please don't. What would the Egyptians say? And then Moses is like, please show me yourself. And God says, you can't see me and live, but I'll pass before you, and then you can see behind me. And then what Moses receives is this message of what we call the 13 midot of Rachamim, the 13 aspects of divine grace, which in Hebrew are Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed, V'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Noseh Avon, V'Fesha, V'Chata, V'Nakeh. There's more, but that's where we cut it in the liturgy anyway. If you're going to go on Sefaria, I made a whole source sheet about this. It turns out that actually bits of that liturgy or fragments or versions of it show up in two other places in the Chumash and various other psalms and things like that. So it may be like an older liturgy that's getting, when something like that happens, where you have different like echoes or refractions, it's presumably quite an ancient text, but it's almost like a formula, like a magical formula where we're saying, God, remember, you're kind and gracious and compassionate, right? And this is, we don't say it standard on Shabbat, but we say it on the High Holy Days and on the Regalim, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. We say it as we open the Ark. It's like a focal point of the service. As we open the Ark, we intone this liturgy. And it's also the centerpiece of the Slichot liturgy, which for Ashkenazim, we just do as we're getting closer to Rosh Hashanah, and particularly we have this service the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah. Everyone should come to Bonei Shalom. I believe we're live streaming, but if you want to be there in person, great. Next Saturday night, the 9th. But Sephardim do it the whole month of Elul. They get up, they have a pre-Shacharit service with various poetry, piyutim, and prayers, penitential prayers. But again, this is the center of the liturgy for that whole month of leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is saying this over and over again. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun. Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious. Actually, somebody else read it. I've heard enough of my voice. Jerry. Or someone.
Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the inequity of parents upon children and children's children, up to the 3rd and 4th generations.
So we usually cut it here, yet not remitting all punishment. That's where in the liturgy it cuts. But actually the whole phrase is saying, well, there is some sort of karmic consequence, but it's limited. Like God sort of like stops things continuing, like blood feuds for, just spiraling and going on forever. And I really like this this sort of singable English. Yud Hey, Vav Hey, compassion and tenderness, patience, forbearance, kindness, awareness, bearing love from age to age, lifting guilt and mistake, and making us free. So just a little minute, I want to ask folks to respond to anything that comes up looking at this liturgy, and then I have one more question before we close. What do you think of calling God by these 13 names?
Well, and I know for me, like this ends up just being, somebody brought up mantras earlier, and this ends up being like the mantra of the afternoon of Yom Kippur. You do it over and over and over again, and you're already kind of woozy at that point in the afternoon. So for me, this ends up being something that I can kind of anchor myself to when I'm not feeling very well. So that's more like an emotional response, not like a response to the text of the words.
I love it. That's great. An emotional anchor, especially on Yom Kippur when we're not feeling great. Any other reflections? Shula, if you're sharing, you're muted. So I have a closing question stroke challenge for everybody, which is there some way that you want to up level your prayer life, or anything you want to commit to in terms of your prayer life between now and Yom Kippur? It could be simple. The simpler and smaller, the better.
Say it again, please, Rabbi.
What is your do you have an intention regarding your prayer life between now and Yom Kippur? Is there anything you'd like to do or not do? Steve, I thought you were doing full prostration there for a second.
No, I was scratching my foot.
You know, I'm thinking of the need to clear my mind. You know, it's already, school's just starting. I'm starting to get cluttered. And how do I clear my mind? What do I need to do? Whether it's meditation or prayer of some sort, just to clear out my mind.
Yeah. Beautiful. Do you get any answers? What do you need to do to clear out your mind?
That's a good question.
Run away from home.
Anybody else want to share any takeaways, or like, oh, I'm going to try and do this?
Well, something I haven't thought about at all is Psalm 27, that it's time to tune in. And see if what it has for me.
Great. Love it.
The Elul sneaks up so fast, and here we are halfway through, and I haven't once opened the Psalms and looked at 27.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that's a challenge. You want to try once before Rosh Hashanah, or once a week, or once a day? What's your goal?
Well, I should at least start doing it.
Okay,
How
at least once.
often I manage, I don't know. There is intention, and then there is what you actually do.
So I hear your intention is to read it at least once,
Yeah,
and sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Great, I love it. Daniel, what about you?
Well, I'll try for a second heat bodedut per day. We'll see if I can do that.
Great. Well, if you daven, I don't know how many times a day you daven. Even if you daven once a day, you're doing so well. It's amazing. So, but you could just make it your practice whenever you daven. It's great. What was I going to say? Oh, I wanted to say it makes me feel so empowered and inspired to know that I'm with such daveners. When I get to shul on Rosh Hashanah and you guys are there, either on live stream, well, Steve, you said you were traveling, but many of you will be there on live stream or in the room, and it will give me such koach. I really appreciate hearing about your prayer life and to know that there are such rich and real prayer lives and prayer relationships going on in this group. It really gives me fortitude to know that we'll be there davening together, and being that kind of knowing this inner circle. I'm sure there are so many amazing daveners in the room at Bonnet, but like it's very helpful and inspiring to know something about the people I'm davening with in their spiritual lives.
Well, I'll be davening too, just at my parents' synagogue.
Fantastic. So we're hooking up that grid, that prayer grid, international, interstate network of prayer. So thank you, everybody. I really feel inspired, and we'll have our fourth and final class next week. We'll turn our attention a little bit more to Tzedaka and Tzedek, and I hope you all can join us again.
Actually, I had a question. Am I imagining this? I thought I saw an email saying that there was a congregational meeting next Thursday night about the new building. Am I the only one that remembers seeing that?
Yeah, I actually sent a message to the office saying, wait a minute, are you really going to have a meeting conflicting with a Bonnet class?
Shocking. I know. How could this class not be
For which I
always
always get flack, by the way. So, but that was not planned when we set this up. So
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on there. Sorry.
Last I heard is they said, well, maybe they'll do it after the class. And I'm like, really? 8 o'clock?
Late, yeah.
Or maybe we could move the class a little earlier. What time is the meeting at 7?
There's no details. So I don't even know if this meeting is going to happen.
Yeah, I can't find. I was just looking for the email and I couldn't find it. So I thought I was imagining it, but apparently I'm not.
It was in last week, but it wasn't in today's e-news.
I gotta hop, but if there's a conflict, then I will definitely coordinate with Jennifer
Okay, so I'll leave that with you, Daniel, to follow up, and you'll let me know. Yeah. And I'm willing to move the time of the class if that's the.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right, many blessings. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hosting, Daniel. Bye.
Thank you.